It's Sunday morning, and that means it's time for another Hook of the Week here at Black Bear Forge. This week, I thought I would make another version of a ceiling hook using the concept of the split backplate that we looked at, a couple of weeks ago, but just a little bit different approach on that style of hook. It's one that I'm kind of intrigued by, and I wanted to try some more things. Now, my initial attempt at this hook didn't come out very well. I was trying to make this for a sloped ceiling, and it just needs a little bit more work to make it work just right. This one would work, but it's kind of ugly. So I think instead of going for the sloped ceiling hook, we're going to go for a flat ceiling, and that will be good practice. And then once I think I've got the techniques figured out and what the right order of process is, then maybe I'll try one for a sloped ceiling and see if I can achieve what I set out to do in the first place. But for today's hook, we're just going to make one that hangs 90 degrees, so for a flat ceiling, more typical in most houses anyways. Now to make this hook, I'm just going to use a piece of old rusty 3/4 inch square bar or 20 millimeter square bar that I found out in this scrap bucket outside the shop. So we're still using material that is left over from some other project and doesn't have any really strong purpose in life. So I'm just going to cut a chunk of this, maybe 3 or 4 inches. Probably we're going to end up cutting some of that off before we're all done, but that gives us enough we can hold on to it while we do our split, open that up, and draw the hook out. And as we go along, I will try to explain why I'm doing it that way and what I might have done different on the first hook that I don't think was as good an idea. And we can kind of learn from some of the mistakes I made on this one. But I decided not to show the making of this one because it really just didn't go all that well. So let's go cut the material, light the forge, and get to work. I'm going to run this back about an inch. No need to lay it out. I just eyeball what I want. It looks pretty good. And we'll cut halfway through from this side. A little can of water I cool my punch in. That's about it for this heat, but that's pretty close to halfway. I don't actually have to cut all the way through from both sides and meet in the middle, but I want to get pretty close. Then we'll go to the vise and split it from the end. Just use the same chisel and just go right down that thin spot that we've left. This also helps guarantee a better transition at the bottom. And start spreading that. Another thing you might see in here is that there's not as much burr in there as we do when we get things split halfway from each side, and that means it's going to be easier to clean up if you need to clean it up. In this example, that's going to be up against the ceiling, so I'm not real worried about forging that in. You can clean it up, grind it if you need to, and we may do some of that, but it's not as big a deal as if it's on the outside of the hook. Open some of this up at the edge of the anvil here. also helps upset it right through here some, and that will help form a little bit nicer transition. It's real easy to fold this over and force a cold shut in there. So you want to go a little bit slow as you open this and keep your eye on that. I'm going to flare these out and thin them some. And that's just part of opening it up to keep working different parts of it so we avoid that cold shut. That could be hotter. I'm starting with the cross peen and then going to the face of the hammer to smooth things out. Now, in my previous attempt that didn't go so well, I slit this, left it closed, turned it around, and did most of the forging on this. I didn't shape the hook, but I did all the drawing out. And then when it came time to try to upset in here and get all this worked, it just did not behave well. I really messed up my transition point here, and I created cold shuts because it just didn't have the mass it needed. So while I think this is going to be a little bit harder to work with to draw this out, it's going to make these transitions look a lot better, and I think in the long run that will be better. The tongs I'm using today are a pair of V-bit tongs from Off Center Toolworks. I've always liked their tongs. I've got quite a few of them. I think Blacksmiths Depot's who sells those. I know somebody's going to ask. Now I think I'm going to go ahead and drive this down. It looks like a nice round transition through here that isn't likely to form a cold shut. So I think I'm okay to get in here and work this way. I think that's going pretty well. I'll finish refining that after we do the hook, but I think we're in good shape. We don't have to do any major shaping to this anymore. Definitely got some wonkiness going on there. We can try and fix some of that now, but if we just keep our eye on it and work on it a little here and there, we can get it out of there before we're done. It's also really crooked this way, so I think I will try and drive this side down a little bit more. Now, something else that would really be nice at this stage of the game would be to have a striker so that I can work this between a couple of really wide fullers, but since I don't, I can't do that. I could use the treadle hammer, and that's what I would probably do if we weren't looking at a video at the moment, but I think that straightens that out a little bit better as far as cleaning up that curved profile. This is just a small rounding hammer. It also gives us a place to kind of straighten the bar out. Like I say, we're going to do a lot more straightening on this before we're done, so not a big deal at this point. Just don't let it get any worse. Okay, now I really am going to turn it around. No more teasing. I'm going to start drawing this out using the guillotine tool with a fuller in it. Make a nice smooth transition point. It's kind of hard to get a grip on, but we'll do the best we can. This is where that flange is kind of in the way. So I'll run it up till the flange bumps into the back of the guillotine tool, and that's where my fuller will be. It'll take a couple of heats to define that. That is coming out a little bit weird because I can't get the flange in tight the way I might like to, but I think it's going to work by the time we're done drawing it out. Now on the one that I decided I didn't like, I did a double fuller, and I was going to leave a little decorative element in between there, a little kind of a molding, I guess you'd call it. But unfortunately, all this made it hard to get the bends that I really wanted, since this one was supposed to be hanging from the ceiling at an angle. And it just really, I think, distracts. So this time we're just going to fuller in. And we may fuller multiple times to start drawing it out, but we're only going to have this one transition, and then it'll be a smooth taper out to the end of the hook. I want bevels on the bar in the long run, so I'm going to bevel my fuller mark here so that that transition comes out smoother. And I'm going to go ahead and just fuller in a little bit down here just to reduce the mass while I'm working in the guillotine tool. And that should make it easier to draw this out. So I'll do that once or twice. And we're going to need to cut this off. That's way more material than I need. There doesn't need to be a lot of precision here. Just don't go too deep. This is just using the fullers as a drawing out tool. But next, I think I'll go ahead and cut that off and get rid of all that extra material. If you want a really long hook, leave more material. Try not to cut all the way through and hit your hardy with your hammer. So I'm working off the edge here, so I can just kind of break that off there, I think. And now we can draw this out. Now let's be honest with each other. This is the kind of thing I would just take under the power hammer. I'd do all the heavy work of drawing it out in one, maybe two heats, and be on to shaping the hook and doing the refinements. Doing it at the anvil by hand is going to take just a little bit longer. It's not really a big deal, but if you're trying to do production work, it can become a big deal. And since a lot of what I do is production work, or my time in the shop is limited, being able to do things a little bit quicker and more efficiently pays off quite often. But we'll do it this way anyways. It's moving to a thinner part of the horn so I can get this plate up closer. Be aware of this, you don't want to get your hand up there, so make sure you're not choking up on your hammer. I think that's all I can do at the horn. I can get in here tight to the face of the anvil much easier than I could the horn, so we'll find this here. I just want a nice even taper. I'm not going to take this to a sharp point. I'm not going to do any kind of fancy scroll ins or curls. Try to get things straight at this point. I'm going to leave this square with a very heavy chamfer. But you could round it up if you wanted to, or leave it square with sharp corners. You could put a twist in it if you wanted to. But I don't think it needs a twist. I think that would distract from the other lines of the hook. I'm pretty happy with that, but I think we can do a little bit more up here before we shape it into a hook. This needs to be cleaned up, and I think a file or grinder, whichever you've got, is the way to do this. A file might be more accurate, but you can just see some irregularities in there that to me distract. So it's about noon for me. So I'm going to take a lunch break, let this cool, and then we'll get right back to it in just a few seconds for video time and do a little bit of filing, maybe a little bit of grinding. We'll clean this up, then we'll shape it into a hook. I've been spending some time filing this and trying to get everything to kind of balance and clean up a little bit. I suppose in the long run, if you're going to do a lot of these, actually making a bolster that was this size that you could drive this down into and get everything clean and straight wouldn't hurt. But I still have a little more of this to do, and it's just kind of up to how far you want to take something like this. You don't have to file it perfectly smooth. You can leave it a little rough if you like it. I just want it a little bit more regular, a little more symmetrical in all the transition points. So if you look one side versus the other, they all look like they came off the same hook. Although there is an old boat builder saying that says you can't see both sides of the boat at the same time. I think I'm pretty happy with that at this point. It looks much better than this distorted, deformed thing does. So the next thing we need to do is put holes in it, I think. And we can either drill these holes from the back. We're not going to get a drill press down in here, so we'd probably drill them from the back with a hand drill and a vise. Or we can punch holes. I think I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes. I think that'll be pretty quick and easy, and I want to go ahead and blacken this and scale that shiny stuff up because I don't really want that showing in the finished hook. So we're going to go back over to the forge of the anvil, get it hot, punch a couple of holes, shape the hook, and we should be about done. I'm just going to use a fairly skinny punch and a bolster plate because we're going to punch this all from one side. On thin material like this, a bolster plate is always beneficial so you don't form it badly trying to punch over the Pritchell hole or something. Just get it started there at the anvil and try and line that up over the hole. It's just a matter of practice. This hot mill glove will take this kind of proximity to the heat, but I sure wouldn't try this with a leather glove. You heat up a leather glove, it keeps burning you even if you get away from the heat. There's one hole. I'm trying to punch these for something about like a number 8 or number 10 wood screw. If you want to use lag bolts, punch it a little bit bigger. I would have burned the heck out of myself with a leather glove there, but the hot mill glove, I'm just a little warm, and as soon as I get away from it, it starts to cool off again. You want to clean that plate up and really make sure we're at 90 degrees in both directions before we bend the hook. But first, a touch mark. Because this is a ceiling hanging hook, I'm going to make it visible, or right side up, I should say, from the hook end, even though that's kind of opposite the way this tapers. And now is a good time to try and clean all this up and make it square and flat. It's looking pretty darn good. And we may have to do a little bit more of this when we bend the hook, but I want to do as little as possible to this portion of it now. The thick wire brush takes scale off pretty fast, and this long flexible one gets into more of the little crevices. Sometimes I use both. The first thing I want to do is just put a little bit of a bend in the end to make it look kind of graceful, but I'm not going to do a full scroll end. And go to our hook bending jig and bend a nice hook in there. But your choice now is, do you want that to be straight like that? I'd like the center of the hook to be in the center of this, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a back bend. And personally, I think that looks much better. You want to make sure it's in line. And of course, you could put this at 90 degrees if you wanted to. It would actually make it easier to get the screw in, but I kind of like it in line myself. I think that's pretty much done. Now it just comes down to my usual paste wax finish as it cools. And then we can take a closer look at it. Well, there we have a completed hook. I am really very happy with the way this one came out. I like this design. I like the style. There's not much I would change about this, and I'm not sure even what that would be, but inevitably the next time you do one, you try something a little bit different. And it came out way better than the one that I had tried the other day. Of course, I didn't try to put this one on an angle, and that was part of the problem with this first one. But this just all came out much nicer. And the big differences in the way I did these is this one, I tried to do the hook gull first before I opened up the split. I did the split, but left it closed up. And this one, I did the split, opened it, refined this, and then drew it out. Also, I did not try to do this little ornamental bit right here in the middle. I still kind of like that idea, and I may try and do another one of these at some point that has that. And the final thing is, this one's straight across, this one is supposed to be on an angle. And I would still like to make one on an angle. I just need to think how I'm going to pull that off so that I don't mess all this up while I'm trying to get that angle. Things like this forged at an angle are always a lot more fiddly than things that are just forged straight and square. So I would say it's always a pretty good idea to do your first test piece in a straight version with flat and 90-degree angles and all that kind of stuff before you start messing with the more complicated stuff. And maybe one of these days we'll do another one like this, but not anytime soon because I don't want to be too repetitive on Hook of the Week. But in any case, I'm pretty happy with the way this one came out. I will probably explore more hooks done somewhat in this method with that split that's opened up to form the back plate. I just really like that solid one-piece look. The joinery is nice on a lot of hooks, but sometimes the joinery is just there because it has to be, and it doesn't really add to the overall effect or the functionality of the hook or something. And the massive transition point here between the thin back plate and the gracefully tapering hook is something I really kind of like. Now, some of you watching probably noticed that saw that I used at the very beginning of the video. That's a saw that was sent to me by Evolution Power Tools, and I'm going to do a full review on that. In fact, I've already done most of it, and probably on Friday this week is when I'll have that done and ready. So check back Friday if you want to see more about the Evolution Power Tools cold saw. But for now, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the project, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends. If you'd like to provide financial support for the videos here at Black Bear Forge, there are links in the video description for both PayPal and Patreon. Those are merely donations. The content is free. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we will see you for the next one.